Welcome back. In this video, what we're going to be doing is looking at actually creating our collectible, which is what I said as a challenge in the last video. So the very first thing is our cave system is where we're going to have our collectibles, and you can use this same setup in any form of any game. It does work quite well. Obviously, there are better options in other type of games. This is what we're going to use. The very first thing is you can see that our caves have all these green crystals throughout them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have special crystals which are actually going to be blue in color. So to change the color, what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of things. The very first one is we're going to go down to our Underworld pack in our prefabs, and let's actually just grab this crystal too. Drag it out. Yeah, it might do the job. Crystal 3. Crystal 3 looks a little bit more impressive, so I'm actually going to keep on to that. So, now that I know it's going to be Crystal 1, sorry, not Crystal 3, Crystal 1. So I'm going to remove that. So that's the one I want. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through and duplicate that. So I can right button click, and you'll see that there are no duplicate options. That's because the keyboard shortcut for it is Control D. So with the Crystal 1 selected, press Control D, and you'll see that there's another crystal that's selected. Now it's called Crystal 4 because it's recognized the pattern, but you can see that it looks the same as Crystal 1. Now I'm just going to go through and rename that by pressing F2 on my keyboard, and I'm going to call it Crystal Blue. Now the problem with Crystal Blue is when I open it up, they're all green. They're not, or you could say aqua, depending, but it's not the color I'm after. We have to find out what particular material it uses. So if I click on the bits underneath, it uses this crystal material. Now I could change that main color to, let's say, blue, and it does change our crystal. However, it changes all the other ones as well. Now I only want a couple of these blue crystals throughout, so I'm actually going to have to return that to white just by pressing Ctrl Z to undo. So I want those ones to stay green. So to do that, I need to go to where that material is located. Now that is actually in the Underworld Origin Textures folder, and you'll see that that crystal material is there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, duplicate this material by pressing Ctrl D, and you'll see crystal, which is what I had, and now Crystal 1. Again, I'm going to press F2 to rename and call that one Crystal Blue. Now, what I'm doing is I'm actually setting up a second copy of everything. Rather than actually reinserting the texture, reinserting and creating from scratch, I'm using all the previous settings and only going to change one particular setting. So this main color, I'm going to change that to blue. And I've accidentally minimized that. So change it to a blue color. And you'll see that this time my material is now blue, but my crystals are staying green. Awesome. Here comes the next bit. We have this new material, but our crystal blue is still green. How do we fix it? Well, to do that, each of our LODed, remember the LOD stands for occlusion culling, still uses this old material. So what we want to do is we want to change what that material is. To do that, if we have this one selected, we can just drag and drop our new material. Okay, so you can see that we're actually taking it step by step to make sure we're working. So this time we will actually need this interact text, GUI text item. So I'm just going to save my script, go back to Unity, and this interact text I need to give something. So if you remember from our last scene in our last video when it was pressing E to enter into the cave, we really should have actually created that GUI text as a prefab. Now to create prefabs, I'm actually just going to go through and do this very quickly for you because we've been through it in a previous series. I'm just going to create a folder called prefabs to keep them organized. I'm going to then create a new prefab, and I'm going to call this interact GUI text. It can be called anything, but that will do us. The next thing is I don't actually have any GUI text items in this particular scene. So I'm actually going to go through, save my scene, and open up my other scene that currently has that GUI text. And you'll see that this interactable GUI text is this press E to enter one that we were using before. So again, to create a prefab, you just drag and drop the item from your hierarchy or your scene down over the top of your prefab, let it go, and it will turn blue. Now, once you've got it blue, you know that it's prefab. It is a correct prefab, and you can just drag and drop it in. And what you'll end up happening, if you're on the scene view, drag and drop it in, you'll end up getting another one. Okay, so now that we've got our prefab, to make sure that the font and everything is still the same, we can go to Scenes and open back up our cave scene. We'll save our horror scene as we go. And we now have this prefab we can drag and drop into our hierarchy or our scene. And if we go to the game view, we now have this press E to enter appearing, which is awesome. Our final step, again, we've done all this before. I'm just duplicating and doing the same thing again. I can just drag and drop it from my hierarchy window down into there. Alternately, I can click the drop down, and there's my interact GUI text, which I can double click. So, all these error messages, what were they? It says the variable interact text of Amy and Ray has not been assigned. That's because we had nothing in it, but we were trying to possibly use it, so it was just letting us know that. So we can hit clear and hit play. And now that that's come up, you can play through, go through this long cave, look at my thing, and you can see that I've got press E to collect. My red error message isn't coming up, and I could just press E, but nothing actually happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit play, and this is the final part of getting collectibles. Well, let's get rid of the rest of these comments that we've put in. Okay, so check to see if the letter E is pressed. If it is pressed, then do something. So if the input docket key E, so let's make E our action key. I'm just going to send myself a debug.log E was pressed. And I now know that this part here actually works quite well, so I'm going to comment that one out. I'm going to leave it there just in case I need to test it later. So if the input key was pressed, it will send me a message to my console, and then it will load a level. Well, hang on, that's not right. Let's first off, we know we don't want to load a level when we collect an item. That just doesn't work, unless it's like a teleportation automatically activating device or something silly like that. So I'm actually going to delete that line because I know that I don't need it. And I'm just going to put in collect object bits. So I'm going to save that, go back to Unity, hit play. And I'm actually not going to keep running up and down my hallway because that's taking forever. So let's do this. Let's find my first person, hit F to get close. And I'm actually going to just drag my blue crystal out in front of the player, so it's not as far away. So you can see that that's there now. And as I'm looking, now you'll see what I've just done is I've actually just dragged it out. The problem is my other crystal blue had all these collectibles in it. That's what they were called. However, this one is untagged. So I need to make sure that the one that I've put out in the other cave, I hit apply, which will then fix up my other collectible here. If you do need more help with that, just ask me. So you can see now when I look at it, it says press E to collect. When I press E, it says E was pressed. Okay, awesome. So final thing, we now need to go through and collect the object. Now when you actually collect the object, there's going to be a couple of things that happen. The first one is adds the score. Second one is actually delete the object. Now it tricks you into thinking you've collected it, but technically you're deleting it. So if you have a score of 0 and then you delete an item and add your score +1, you actually think you're getting something. So this part here, I'm actually going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it score. So var score. I'm going to define it as an integer. And I'm going to initially set it to 0 because your score is always going to be 0 initially. and this is for collectibles. So I'm going to say that score is equal to score plus 1. So that means whatever score is plus 1 is what the score will be updated to. So the new score value is equal to what the current score is plus 1. To delete the object, we just literally type destroy. And we need to define it as an object. Now, most times you would usually write other or something like that. It's not exactly what we want. We actually want to destroy this hit, whatever we hit with a collider. So hit.collider.gain object is what we want to destroy, is what we're looking at. Control S to save that. The final thing is we don't know what our score is. So every time we get a score, I'm actually going to put in another debug.log. And I'm going to make that score. And you'll see that I haven't actually put this one in quotation marks like the other ones. That's because I want it to be what this variable is rather than the word. If you want, try putting quotation marks in and see what happens. So jump back to Unity. Let's hit play. Clear all my error messages, all my console messages out. Alright, unfortunately I had a few little technical hitches with my recording software and doing that action. So I've quickly gone through and applied that material to each of those crystal blues. So again, just what I've done is go into textures, dragging and dropping and placing it until I get that little plus symbol on my icon, and then dropping it. Now that's going to freeze my video if I do it again. So I've actually already done that on all 3 of those crystals, and you can see that in the preview. Unfortunately, my icons haven't updated yet in my project window, which is really weird. I've never had that before. However, if I drag and drop it out, it is a blue crystal. And you can see, as long as I don't click something random, you can see that this blue crystal is very different to those green ones. Now, if I want to manipulate this one anymore, I can actually come in and I can change from that purpley color to a bit more of a dark blue. Again, I've got to just deselect that. There we go. You can see that that blue crystal is different to those green crystals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be placing these all throughout my entire area. But again, crystal blue is what I'm dragging out, but if I drag out the crystal one, which is the same shape, is actually green. Now you can set up any type of collectible item that you want and it'll work the same. Our next little bit is actually in regards to getting it tagged and ready to go for our different bits and pieces to be a collectible. Now you'll notice that there already is a collider on this crystal. The problem is let's actually delete this one off and let's use this one. So we've only got one on the scene. The only problem is with that collider is that's actually in our LOD 1, LOD 0, LOD 1, and our LOD 2. So it does create a few issues when we're doing it because it means that we'd have to tag every single item here. Now realistically, you would only have to actually label the one that you've actually got as your main one that you're actually going to be close enough to, so it means you're LOD 0, but again, we're not talking too much about occlusion culling in this video series. So the quick workaround is we can actually go through and tag each one of these to be a collectible. And that will solve our issue. The other way we could have done it is we could have added a single collider to our main empty game object and added in our collider, and that would have done the same thing. So why did I just tag it collectible? So if you remember back from our code, is when our first person controller is looking, and my scripts haven't actually loaded as yet, because I have an error in my aiming ray script. So once that's open, we are actually heading to our aiming ray script. You'll actually see that I've already started to have a look at it. So In this section, you've got if hit.collider.gameObject.tag is a collectible. You can see that I'm using the same raycast, and what I'm going to do is, rather than looking at the, if I use the right button, rather than actually looking at the door and seeing if it's an entrance or an exit, I'm actually going to be coming down into my cave system, looking at these blue crystals and seeing if it has the tag of collectible. Now, first things first, let's have a look at this error, line 52, because you guys might be experiencing it as well. And it basically means that I haven't actually finished my bit of scripting before. If I just place in my closing curly bracket and save that, you'll now see that the matching pairs line up, which should get rid of that error. Okay. So, in our script, we actually can just quickly go through and copy and paste that exact line, and I'm just going to replace this section here, and that's what we typed in the last video. If hit.collider.gameObject.tag equals entrance, well, we don't want it to be the entrance, we actually want it to be collectible. Now, typing capitals and lowercase is actually very sensitive here, so just make sure that you've spelt that the exact same way that your tag is spelt. So if you have made a spelling error in either of those two, it won't function for you. Well, we don't need this. Well, we do want the display to console, but let's actually change this debug.log message. And let's say I'm looking at the cave entrance. Well, I'm looking at a collectible item. Now, we don't want it to say, show the message E to enter. The very first thing we want to do is, we could get all this stuff to function as well, but I actually don't want that to happen, because I just want to see if I look at the collectible, is my console going to see it and register? So I'm going to select the bits and pieces that I don't need just yet, right button click, and say toggle line comments, and you can see there's a Control-C short keyboard shortcut. And now that it's grayed out, the computer won't run it. I'm going to save that script, and just to quickly go over, if my ray hits a collider with a game object with a tag of collectible, it will run this bit of code. And we've been through debug.logs before. So let's hit play. He's in his cave, coming all the way down. And as soon as I look at the crystal, I should be receiving a message. Now, why aren't I receiving a message? Let's press Ctrl-Shift-P and see if the ray is being cast. So I can't actually see a ray coming out of my player. So jumping back, it should be saying debug.drawRay. It is on an aiming ray, so let's just make sure that my first person controller has this aiming ray script. And that's my problem. I actually haven't applied the aiming ray script to my first person controller. So just double check. Yep. So the aiming ray script needs to be attached. Now we did attach it in the other scene, but another scene is a different level. The interact text, we're not going to put any down because it's going to create issues just for the moment. So we should be able to get away with it. Okay, now that's in play mode, we can actually go and have a look, and you'll see that the error message I'm getting is talking about not assigning the interact text. That's fine, we're actually going to ignore that error for the moment because we're going to be using it again later, so there's no point removing it. But as soon as I actually come down and looking at that blue crystal, you can actually see that the aiming ray is actually looking at that item, and it's actually recognizing it as well. Again, it's spamming you with those particular null reference exception errors. So from here, we can actually hit play, and that will take us out of the play mode. Let's actually get this second part working. I'm going to, again, ignore the errors for the moment, because we're about to fix that up now. So the very first thing is, let's actually decomment these first two. So it says, show the message, press E to enter when looking at the cave entrance. Well, we don't want it to press E to enter. Let's say press E to collect. We want the item to be collected. And when looking at not the cave entrance, but collectible. Okay, now this interact.text, again, just like the one that we used, press E to enter the cave. It's good practice to keep using the same system. Press E to enter the cave. Well, we don't want it to say E to enter the cave. Let's say press E to collect. So that will actually tell us to get that working. Okay, so now you'll see that I've got my movement again in my cave system. I'm looking at it, it says press E to collect, press E, and you'll see that my E was pressed, and that's 1. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually keep going down through my cave and collect that other crystal I left down there. Press E to collect, and you'll now see that my score is 2. Now the problem is, you'll notice that it didn't actually delete that object. I could keep doing that, but then all of a sudden it went to 3 and 4. And that creates a problem in regards to, which I didn't notice up here. As soon as I walk away, see how that is there? That's because that's the second lot. It looks very simple, but I'm only deleting the one graphic. So there is actually going to be something that I'm going to have to do here. So I'm going to hit play. So currently it is working in most parts, but it is actually this crystal blue. And that's because the collectible collider that I'm looking at will always be this one. And it deletes this particular object. But when you stand far enough with your lot, that's where it is. So that's when you actually come up, you actually start to stretch away from it. So let's go to where the lot is. You'll actually see how it says lot 0, lot 1, lot 2. That's basically the different pictures we're using. So to fix that, let's actually go through and on our main crystal blue, add a component. I'm going to say a capsule collider. I'm going to go to this particular one and I'm going to copy these values. So to do that, I'm just going to click on the little gear icon, go copy component, crystal blue, and I'm going to paste component values, which basically puts the component values in there. Now this is getting really confusing really quickly, so just bear with me as we go along. We're going to remove the component or the capsule collider from each of these crystals. And this will make sense as soon as I'm finished. So now you can actually see I don't have any capsules on here, but my crystal blue does have that capsule on it. So when I look at this item, this crystal blue, and I delete this item, it will therefore delete all its children underneath it as well. Now to make that appear for all of our items, let's make sure we hit apply to update the prefab, which will then work for others. So let's just do a quick play test of that one. So when I look at that, press E to collect, and if I walk back, I shouldn't be able to see that one at all. And again, you see it being deleted from the hierarchy window. Turning around, let's go and have a look at this one. Press E to collect, and you'll see that the entire section gets deleted from that hierarchy window. Alright, that's exactly what we're after. Final thing, how do we get the player to actually see that score? Well, that's when we start to get into GUI later on, but for now we are getting that score, we are getting it to count. So all you need to do is place these wonderful blue crystals that you've created all throughout the map. Let's say about 10 should be enough, and just really go through and add them where you think that the player A will see them, and they're not too hard to find unless you're trying to create it like a puzzle horror game. With that said, in our next video we're actually going to be looking at a couple of different bits and pieces, predominantly on finalizing off the GUI to give that user the feedback, and then from there we'll actually be looking at creating an NPC or a character to actually give us this quest to go and collect the crystals. And after that, we will basically be making it a bit more scary looking because it's quite bright at the moment. And then we're pretty much done. So bear with me, there's probably another 3 videos coming. Apologies for the delay on the uploads, but they are all coming, they will be there. And if you want anything particularly focused about, please just let me know in the comments below. Cheers.